What's happening, everybody? So, manual or automatic? Which is better? Well, I'm going to make an argument here that you can't make an argument for which car is better. The reason why is because manual or automatic depends on a lot of different variables when you're choosing a platform. Depends on what you're going to do with the car, basically. For me, I test drove the SRT with a manual transmission, and I hated it. It doesn't mean it's a bad car, and it doesn't mean that it's a bad option if you want a manual transmission in a Challenger, but it just didn't feel right to me. I like the way that the automatic felt in a larger car. Now, if I'm going to make that argument for the Mustang, I'd be a fool. I have been on record saying that the Mustang with a 6-speed manual is by far my favorite pony car if I was looking for a manual transmission option. But I hated the automatic in that car. It just didn't seem to fit the car. It didn't suit it really well. But I want to take this a little bit further though. Let's say, for example, you're building a drag car. Which is better for you? Well, in my experience, the lighter the weight of the car, the better it is to have a manual transmission. In the heavier cars, you need the torque multiplication of that torque converter to get you going and get you off the line. So, if I'm building a Mustang, for example, I'm going to want to build a Mustang with a manual transmission. If I'm building something bigger, say for example, if I'm running the Challenger, I would prefer it to have an automatic just because of the weight of the car more or less dictates it. So, that's kind of the platform argument, but what about just in general, manual versus automatic? You know, there's guys out there that have this real bully mentality when it comes to manual transmissions, and they feel like they've got more control over the car. They feel like they're more of a connection between themselves and the machine that they're piloting, which makes sense. It's true, and I can understand that quite a bit. You know, you kind of get this feeling when you're driving a manual transmission, and once you really are well practiced at it, running through those gears is actually a lot of fun, and you do feel like you are a bit more connected to the car. I can also make an argument that a manual transmission, if you're building a drag race platform, is a better way to go for a couple of reasons. The first reason is they are much more difficult to launch. So as a training aid, if you can launch a manual transmission car, you can absolutely launch a car with an automatic. I'll say that they're a bit safer, and the reason why is because if things get a little hairy, instinctively you're going to hit the clutch pedal on a manual transmission car. What that does is it basically turns the car in just into a rolling chassis at that point. You have no power accelerating you, but you don't have any engine braking either. And let's say you're running down the quarter, you've got about a mid 11-second car, and you hit third gear and spin the tires rather violently. Going into third gear, you can just hit the clutch and the car will more or less sort itself out a little bit. In an automatic, if you lift, now you've gone from having no traction going forward, now you basically more or less it's engine braking at this point, akin to, you know, pulling on that e-brake a little bit, and now you're trail braking, which if you already don't have traction now means that you really don't have traction anymore. So in that respect, I will say that they're better at building a project that is going to be run on a drag strip. That's not to say that it's the best option though. If you're going for the best ET that you can get, obviously I'm going to say an automatic because it's easier to launch. Typically, an automatic is going to have an advantage between starting line and about the 330 mark over its counterpart with a manual transmission in general. So that gives you my ideas with that. Now, again, also with an automatic, where you're going to have an advantage is repeatability. It just does the same thing over and over and over again. All you got to do is put the thing in drive, mat the throttle, and sit back and enjoy the ride. Keep the thing pointed straight, and if it does get a little bit hairy, just roll off the throttle a little bit, and you should be fine. So in that case, they're more consistent, and that means a lot, and they're easier to drive, and it doesn't take your focus away from driving the car. Most of the time, the guys with manual transmissions, unless you've got a shift light, you're constantly peeking down at that tack. You're taking your eyes off the road. You don't know what your competitor on the next lane over is doing, and for that brief moment, you're just not paying attention. All you're doing is watching a tack, hitting your marks, and going through the gears. So, that's starting to look a little bit 50-50. Here's something else to consider about manual transmissions. If you're taking your car to the track, and right now we're talking about drag strip, if you're taking your car to the track, you're going to be power shifting that thing going through the gears. That's hell on synchros. It's also hell on shift forks. A shift fork is a thing that slides the gears back and forth inside the housing. Well, when you're bang shifting that thing, you're putting lateral stress on those shift forks. Some are known to crack and break. I know, I've done it a few times. But again, you're tearing up synchros and you're tearing up shift forks in the long run. It's just going to happen. So it's another thought that you might have when you're putting together a package. Street or otherwise, these are the things you got to look out for. But there's a little bit more to it than just that. If you're putting together a car that you know is going to be multi-purpose, you want to build something that is just going to be fun to drive. My advice, let's say you're building a Mustang, definitely go with the manual transmission, because with the Mustang, that platform will allow you to do a lot of different things. You might want to take it autocrossing or do some open track events. Maybe take it to the drag strip or just playing around on the street, kind of hooning around a little bit. In that respect, the manual is a lot more fun to drive. Just understand that chances are, if you are beating on your manual transmission, it will bite you in the ass eventually. Automatics don't really have that problem, although they do fail. They just don't really seem to have that problem in general. Now, I would never suggest running a manual transmission, an automatic transmission on open track events unless you've got a lot of cooling mods, because automatic transmissions generate a ton of heat. That's kind of how they work. So it's a hydraulic pump, and to get your car moving forward, there is fluid friction that's taking place. Do that for a long amount of time, much longer than what you'd find on a drag strip or even a 1 mile blast, you're going to find out really quick that that automatic is going to fail. So again, win for the manual transmission. But I want to get back into the platform specific stuff. I've always felt that the lighter the car, the more suited it is for a manual. The heavier the car, the better suited it is for an automatic. Big engine with an automatic, fairly mild gear is a lot of fun to drive, and they're fairly reliable. Big engine with a manual transmission, you can blow up the manual. And keep one thing in mind, the way that transmissions are rated nowadays, you can get away with running quite a bit of power and beating them up, but you can't get away with murder, so to speak. Basically, any manual transmission will fail eventually if you're beating on it. So will an automatic, just typically the automatic's going to last a lot longer. So at any rate, wanted to kind of share my thoughts with you guys on that. I know there's always some kind of a debate, and there's always that question, well, why didn't you get the 6-speed manual? I tell you something, when it really boils down to is, what are you comfortable with? And it's really about the comfort aspect that you've got to focus on, and what is the best fit for you. And what I mean by that is, again, some transmissions may favor different cars, but if you buy a platform and the seating position or the steering wheel position makes it to where running through the gears is just not comfortable, that can be an issue. And some guys even get so testy about what shoes they wear when they're running an automatic or running a manual transmission. There's some things to consider. So it's not just comfort, it's ergonomics, and the ergonomics of the platform that you buy are going to also help to dictate what kind of transmission that car has. So, give you an example. I had a C4 Corvette. Loved the car. It was an automatic. I drove a C4 Corvette with a 6-speed. I hated that car because I never could really feel comfortable with it. Now, Challenger, like I said, didn't like the 6-speed, really liked the automatic. But there's a whole bunch of different reasons why I would prefer to have the automatic in the Challenger, one of which was the ergonomics and just the way that the car felt when I was going through the gears. Just didn't like it. So, again, I get the reasons why having a manual transmission is a lot of fun. You get to row through the gears. It's kind of a cathartic thing, kind of like punch and bag. You're just kind of rolling through the gears, and you do really feel a lot more connected. But it's not just old men that are going to be forwarding their cash over to these cars with automatics. You got to remember a little bit of a history here. See, back in the day, it used to be that the manual transmission cars were better for a couple of reasons. One, you got an extra gear. 3 speeds or maybe even only 2 with your automatic versus a 4-speed in the manual. So you had more gear selection. The second thing, manuals are a lot lighter than automatics typically, and let's be honest, automatics back in the day soaked up quite a bit of power. So what you may get in some torque multiplication is going to be eaten up in the fact that you're spinning this big ball full of fluid that's going to soak up some power. So in that respect, manuals basically ruled the roost back in the day. But nowadays it's not quite the same. Automatics have come a long way, and with manual shifting 2 different ways in the Challenger, it still makes it quite a bit of fun. Paddle shifting this thing's a blast, and I can still floor shift it manually as well. So I do still have a little bit of that left in the car, a little bit more involvement, but it'll never take the place of a real manual transmission in my heart. So at any rate, let me know what you guys got in your car. Let me know what your thoughts are on the whole manual versus automatic. Y'all have a good one. Adios.